In this lecture, you'll learn about the position utility. With this, you can change how an element is positioned on the page. So here's the overview of the position utilities. First, we have position values. This is an easy way to set the position value to either static, relative, absolute, fixed, or sticky. These examples might look a little strange. You can see, for example, the position fixed is fixed in the middle of the screen. But this is just to demonstrate how you can do that. Then we can also arrange elements. We can arrange them in the top left, top right, the center, bottom left, or bottom right corner. But we can also center elements. So if you look at this next example and compare it, we can see that here it's now being centered directly on the border of the parent element. So this is horizontal and vertical centering for both directions. We can also do it for one direction only, either the horizontal or vertical direction. So here we can see an example of this, where we have them inside of the border again, as we saw with the previous example up here. This will make much more sense when we get to it. Finally, we have some examples of how you can use these positioning utilities. Here we see a notification number on top of a button, a notification circle on top of a button, a marker placed under a button, and we have a progress with steps placed on top of it. Alright, so let's get started. First, we'll look at how to set the position values. So we'll create a div tag here with the class position static to set the position value to static. We'll add the text here. Now let's copy this and paste it in here. Change the class to position relative and the text to position relative. Paste it in again. Change the class and text to position absolute. Paste it in again. Change it to position fixed. And one more time, paste it in and change it to position sticky. Let's take a quick look in our browser. Select the screencast tab up here, and now we can see that some of these have been positioned fixed and absolute. That's why we can see it looks a little strange. We'll look at how to use this in some concrete examples later on in this lecture. Now let's take a look at how we can arrange elements. We will first create a container. So we add a div tag with the class position relative. So this is not a regular Bootstrap container class, but this is a parent element for all of these examples that we'll look at in a moment. So this will have the position relative class. Then we'll add a border. We'll add some margin on all sides and set the width to 50%. We'll also give it an inline style with a height of 300 pixels, like so. Inside of this, we can now create our elements. We'll use a div tag with the class p2 to provide some padding, text white for white text color, bg dark for dark background color. Now we'll start positioning this div element. We'll add the position absolute class and then top 0 and start 0. This will position this in the top left corner. Now let's copy and paste this and change this last class to end 0. This will now position this in the top right corner. Paste it in again. We'll change the top 0 to top 50 and the start 0 to start 50. So now it will be in the center, top left, so not completely in the center. We'll look at how to make it completely centered in the next example, in the next section. Let's copy and paste this and change this top value to bottom, so it becomes bottom 50 and end 50. So this will now be in the center, bottom right. paste this in again here, update the values to bottom 0 and start 0. This will now be in the bottom left position. Copy and paste this and change the classes to bottom 0 and end 0. This will now be in the bottom right position. We'll save this, go into the browser and refresh. Here we see it. We have the parent element with the border, and then we have all the elements placed in the corners and in the center. Next up, we'll see how we can center these elements in both directions or in one direction only. Using this method, we can make them placed exactly on the border, so centered according to the border. So let's see how we do this. We'll start by copying all of this code, since we want to use our wrapper, then paste it in right here. Then erase all of the elements except the first one. Now, first we want to look at how to center elements in both directions. And for horizontal and vertical centering, this only works when using top and start values for positioning. So here we can see we have used the top 0 and start 0. So this will now work when we add the translate middle. This will now translate the element minus 50% in both the X and Y axis. So this corresponds to the top and start values here. Now let's copy and paste this and change this to start 50 and the text to top center. The next will be start 100 and the text will be top right. Paste it in again. Update the top to top 50 and this will now be middle left. The next one we have top 50 and start 50. So this will now be in the middle center. Then we have the top 50 and start 100. This will now be in the middle right. Like so. Then we have the top 100 with start 0. This will now be the bottom left. And then we have the top 100 with the start 50, which will be the bottom center. And finally, we have top 100 and start 100, which will be the bottom right. So let's now take a look at this in the browser. We'll refresh. Here we see we have top left, top center, and top right, and we can see how they are placed exactly in the middle according to the border. Then we have the middle left, middle center, middle right, bottom left, bottom center, and bottom right. Now to see how we can do this in one direction only. So we'll copy and paste this example up here and paste it in right here. Now, horizontal centering only works when using start value for positioning, and vertical centering only works when using top value for positioning. So you must remember that. Let's erase these so we won't have one example left. Top 0 and start 0. So this will be in the top left in the corner where we want it. So we won't change that. Then we'll create the next example, which will have top 0 and start 50. Now we want to place that in the middle horizontally. So we have the translate middle X. This will now be top center. Then for the top right position, we use the top 0 and end 0. If we scroll up here, we can see that was also what we used up here. So this is essentially the same. Now we want the next example in the middle left side. So we have the top 50, start 0, and now we want to translate this or center it vertically. So we have the translate middle Y. Middle left will be the text value here. We'll copy and paste this, which should now be in the middle center. So we must add the number 5 to this class. So we have top 50 and start 50. And now we want to use the translate middle class, which we learned about up here, since we want to translate this both vertically and horizontally to place this in the middle center position. Now we have the middle right position, so we use the top 50 and the end 0 class like so, and then translate middle Y again, just like we saw up here, except this time we're using the end 0 instead of the start 0. But we are centering this horizontally for both of these examples, middle left and middle right. Let's copy the first example here, use it here. We want to create the bottom left example, so we use the values of the classes bottom 0 and start 0. Copy and paste this and add the bottom center, so we use the bottom 0 and the start 50, and we want to translate this or center this horizontally, so we add the translate middle X. Paste it in again to create the last example. In the bottom right position we use bottom 0 and end 0. Once again, this is the same as we saw up here. So all of these examples here is a mix of what we saw here, arrange elements and center elements with the translate middle class, and the two new classes translate middle X and translate middle Y. We'll save this, go back and refresh, and here we see how we can position these elements. So some of them has been centered vertically only, horizontally only, or in both directions, or not at all. So here we're using a mix. This was all about how you can center and arrange elements, and now let's take a look at some concrete examples. First we'll see how we can create a notification number placed on top of a button. So we'll start by creating our button element with the type button. The classes btn, btn primary, and then add the position relative to this parent element. Inside of the button we first add the text, messages, and then we add a span tag with the class position absolute and top 0 and start 100. So this will now be in the top right position. We also add the translate middle class, which we just learned about, to center this both horizontally and vertically. And to use this we must use top and start. We cannot use bottom or end as I told you before. Now we add some more classes for styling. These classes is for positioning of this notification number. For styling we add the badge class, the rounded pill to make it round, and the BG secondary to add a background color. Inside of this span element we'll add the number 3, and then we'll add one more span element with the class visually hidden. So this will be text for screen readers, unread messages. We'll close the span tag, and we have the closed span tag here as well. Let's put these on the same line like so. Now let's save, go back and refresh. So here we see our primary button, and we have this rounded pill badge with the secondary background color and the number 3 placed in the top right corner. centered on the edge or the border. The next example is similar. This will just be a red circle instead of the number. So we'll copy and paste this code here. These classes for the parent element will be the same. We'll keep the text messages. We'll keep the positioning that we're using right here. We'll keep the badge class. Then we'll add a border to it. This will have the color light, so border light. We'll also change the rounded pill class to rounded circle, so this will not be a pill shape but a circle shape. Change the background color to the danger, so we use BG danger, and then we add some padding with the P2 class. Now we want to get rid of this number here, but we still want to keep a nested span element with the visually hidden class and the text unread messages for screen readers. We'll save this, go back and refresh. So here we see the same example with a red circle instead of the gray pill with number inside. We can also see this light border on top of the button. Now let's see how we can add a marker to a button. First, let's create the button element with the type button and the classes bgn, bgn dark, and position relative. Inside this we add the text marker, and now we want to add a Bootstrap icon which will position in the correct place. So to find that icon, we'll go to icons.getbootstrap.com. Then we'll search here for caret and take that caret down fill icon, and then simply copy this HTML here, the SVG code. We'll paste it in right there. And now we'll add some classes. We already have the classes BI, which is short for Bootstrap Icons, and BI caret down fill. Now we want to position this, so we add the position absolute to it, then top 0, since we wanted this to be placed in the bottom, and start 50. We wanted it placed in the bottom center, and we're using top and start instead of end and bottom, since we need to use the translate middle class to center this both horizontally and vertically. Then we add some margin to the top to push it a little bit down, and we'll change the text to dark. If we don't use this text dark, it will be white, since this will inherit the text color of the button. Now we can save this, go back, close this tab and refresh here. Here we see with the marker button with this caret down fill icon positioned in the bottom center. Finally, let's see how we can create a progress component with steps positioned on top of it. So here we start by adding a wrapping element, a div tag with the class position relative, and M4 to add some margin on all sides, and W50, so this example will only take up half of the screen and look a bit more pretty. Then we create our progress element using a div tag with the class progress, and the style, inline style with the height, the value 1 pixel. So this will be the height of our progress. Inside of this we add the div tag with the class progress bar, the row progress bar without any dash. Then we'll also give this an inline style with the width of 50% and the area value now attribute with the value of 50, the area value min attribute with the value 0, and the area value max attribute with the value 100. Remember, you can learn more about how to create these progress component in the component section of this course. So here we have the progress element. Now still inside of the wrapping element, we want to create 3 steps. We'll add the div tag with the classes position absolute, then top 0 and start 0 for the first one, and translate middle. So once again, we can only use translate middle if we're using top and start values, not for bottom and end values. So this is for positioning. Now for the style, we create a badge component with the primary background color, and we make it rounded pill shape. And then for positioning the number inside, we'll add the dFlex class to make it a flex container, and use justify content center to center it, and align item center to center it on both axes. Then we add an inline style to set the width to 2 rems and the height to 2 rem. Finally, we add the text 1. And now we can simply copy and paste this 2 times. Let's first change the text to 2 and 3. Now for the second one, we want to place it in the middle, so we change the start 0 class to start 50. The other classes will be the same, primary and primary for the background color. And for the last one, this should be all the way to the right side, so we change this to start 100, so we can still use translate middle. So don't use end 0 here. Now we want to change this background to BG secondary, since this step is not yet completed. Remember that we set the width of the progress bar to 50% up here. So this will now match with the second steps. So step 1 and 2 is completed, and step 3 is not completed yet. We'll save this, go back and refresh. And here we see our progress component. We can see that we have the blue colored progress bar between step 1 and 2, which also have the blue background color. And then we have the thin gray progress line all the way to step 3. So this was all about how you can use the position utilities.